شو مساوي لك هدول يا بشار؟ خايفين يجوا يقتلوك بالقصر؟ شو مساوي لك هدول؟ هدول شو مساوي لك؟ شو مساوي لك هدول؟
يا الله
الله ينتقم منك. الله ينتقم منك إلهي.
يا الله وردتين يا الله.
So today we will be talking about a 1-year free liberated Syria. So we're going to be talking about like who controls Syria right now, influences, the SDF, the coastal line, and a bunch of other things that happened over the 1-year mark. And we'll be talking about other things as well. So to get started, the parts that are controlled by Syria right now is Ashada controls all the parts of what Assad controlled, right? What were liberated last year was Homs, Hama, Dara, Damascus, Aleppo, Idlib, and Dara. So Israel currently occupies the Golan Heights, which was won during the 1967 Six-Day War. Although people have their own theories that Hafez al-Assad just kind of handed it over to them and that's it. Next is the SDF. They control parts of Aleppo, Raqqa, and Deir ez-Zor, right? And the Druze have a Sweda, but it's really more influence in Sweda and not really controlled by them. That part is still considered controlled by Ahmad al-Shara and the new government. So with the SDF controls really a lot of key parts of the country. They control the northeastern part. And it's really crucial that the new government is able to control this part is because this is where all the rich resources Syria has. So this is the part where the new government can come in, dig up oil, get the oil, sell it off, and other minerals as well. So this is a key part of economic recovery and stability of the country and really wealth for the country. The SDF right now, they have until the new year. Right now I'm filming this on December 16th. So they have until the end of this month to really merge with the new government or else bad stuff will happen to them. Turkey will obviously be involved in this. Turkey right now classifies as the SDF as a terrorist organization because they hop the borders, they blow up cars and all that other stuff as well. So really right now, the SDF really doesn't have a choice. We'll see if they merge in the new government or not. They only have like a little time left. I don't think they will, but we'll see what happens. Could be completely wrong. They're going to try to fight their way, obviously, and we'll see how successful they will be. And it's important to note that the new government has been training for this for some time now because they violated the March agreement that they had. And obviously Turkey will help the new government. And what's crazy is the SDF really, in the past I would have said, oh, they would definitely merge, but right now I don't know because they're kind of not giving that sign right now. And they don't have a key backer. The key backer was the U.S., but the U.S. is really on the new government side right now. The U.S. is helping the new government right now. And we'll see how it ends up. And with the recent dead soldiers in Syria, the American soldiers and the Syrian soldiers, you know, there's conspiracies going around that the SDF let ISIS out of the prison and conducted those attacks against them. So we'll really see how this whole situation plays out and everything as more information comes out. And that's another thing. The SDF controls all the prisons in that area is ISIS-controlled prisons or has ISIS in them. And the SDF controls those prisons. So, and for those who don't know, before Ahmad al-Shara came to the U.S., ISIS tried to assassinate him. There was an assassination plot against him, but it failed. And we'll see how this whole SDF thing comes out. Next is Sweda. This is where the Druze are. So we all know what happened with the Druze community, but it's important to note that when Ahmad al-Shara came in and toppled Assad and the tyrant regime, you know, all the Druze community, they all decided to join with the new government. They were like, okay, we'll see how this goes. However, it's important to note that Hikmet al-Hijr group, that's the other Druze sect that did not want to do all this. They didn't like him. They don't want this, right? So what happened? There was clashes between Bedouins and the Druze. The new government came in and they tried to control it and it went south, right? A lot of innocent people were killed. Yes, I'm not denying that, right? but let's see what happened. The Druze came in. Israel saw this clash between the government and the Druze after the Bedouins did their clash. And Israel was like, oh my gosh, this is a prime opportunity. Let's back the Druze and try to do a coup against Ahmad al-Shara, right? What is this considered in any other country? In any other country, this is considered treason. You will be punished. And when Ahmad al-Shara came to the U.S., there was a meeting between Syrian Americans and Ahmad al-Shara at a hotel. And one person from the crowd did get up and ask, like, hey, the coastal line, the Sueda stuff, and all this other incidents, like, what's going on with that? We want to see better. We want to see stability. We don't want to see all this chaos. And, one thing that made me respect him even more is that he admitted that he's wrong. That's what a true leader does. A true leader doesn't keep committing the atrocities that they're doing, He admitted that, this stuff was handled wrong. We are punishing those who are accountable for their actions, And they are, there's court cases in Syria about this, and there's security personnel who are being charged with stuff that they've done. Same thing with the coastal line, and we'll get to that next, This new government is holding themselves accountable, unlike the old regime. There was no punishments for the security personnel, There was no punishes for Assad's forces. There was no punishes for Hezbollah and the atrocities that they committed. People say, oh, Bashar was much better. If you call burying kids alive much better, if you call all the instability, if you call Syria split into 4 much better, if you call 1 million people plus people dead, we really don't know the true number, better. And if you say that 14 million people displaced is better, this is totally wrong. And it's really showing your hypocrisy during this whole situation of a free Syria. If the roles were switched, if there was a free Palestine, you'll be celebrating, right? But no, since it's Syria, since Assad's gone, since I'm an Assad loyalist, because I'm Shia or Alawite, I don't like this, It's showing your hypocrisy. Next is the coastal line. So on March 6th, pro-Assad gunmen, they ambushed security personnel, and they killed at least 16 of them. And the situation did escalate, obviously, very quickly. And there was innocent people killed. We're not denying that. But again, he admitted that the actions that they took could have been better, could have been more strategic, could have been, just better in general. And he admitted his faults, And he is holding the security personnel accountable again. From the Alawite, what happened at the coastal line, the innocent Alawites, human rights groups say at least 1,400 people were killed. And mostly of them were the minorities, were the Alawites. And it's important to note that there are court cases against the security personnel. 7 of them are being charged with premeditated murder. And there's 7 Assad loyalists who are being charged with inciting a civil war, attacking security forces, murder, looting, and leading armed gangs. This is the part that we don't see, right? In the last 50 plus years of tyranny, the last 50 plus years of oppression, the last 50 plus years of genocide, to be quite frank, there was no court cases with the Assad loyalists and Hezbollah and all these other groups that were killing the innocent people. We can't just forget what happened in 1982, what happened to Hama, 40,000 plus people killed in less than 30 days. But that's who you want in power? That's the family you want in power? You don't want someone who's going to uphold the law. You don't want someone who's going to uphold justice. And again, this is the hypocrisy I'm talking about. And next, we're going to the economy. So Syria has had sanctions on them for the last 50 plus years, right? So it's impossible to say the economy is doing well. It frankly is not. 1 in 4 live in extreme poverty. What that means is $3 a day. They live on $3 a day. And a lot of Syrians are saying, hope is in the air. Just like Assad's fall was quick and swift, we believe Syria's economy will have the same swift recovery. People are returning from Egypt. People are returning from Jordan. People are returning from Turkey. They're ready to rebuild their country, you know? This is a thing that many Syrians have been dreaming for a long time. For 50 plus years, they have been dreaming of this very moment to get rid of the tyrant regime that has been oppressing them for the last 5 decades. There's an economist who's saying, you know, it's impossible to say the economy is doing well. This is the result of a 50-year corruption and mismanagement, you know? And those who live on $3 a day, that's 98% of Syrians fit into that category, you know? For those Syrians who never left the country during this regime and never took refuge anywhere else, they really relied on family from the West to be sending them money every month just to survive on the basics, you know? And right now, the public salaries for the security personnel and the government in general, it's $30 to $50 a month. And the country is so poor that they can't even afford that. For those who employed on the government, Qatar is currently paying their wages. And the country was left bankrupt by Assad. Assad took the country's money with him when he fled to Moscow. He is a coward. He is, quite frankly, a coward, and even worse than that. So, as we all know by now, is sanctions are going to be lifted on Syria. It was recently passed, and it will come into effect. And this is a big deal. You know, the Caesar sanctions, for those who don't know what the Caesar sanction is it was a Assad personnel who was taking pictures of the oppression that they've done in the country, the tyrant behavior that they've done. You know, he was taking pictures of the prisons, of the torture methods they had. We can't forget what this regime did. They slowly dipped people into acid, just letting them burn alive, you know. The human press, the guillotine, the just burying kids alive, you know, just going up, oh, you know, I feel like killing somebody today. Let me just go out in the streets, boom, you know. And no accountability was there, you know. And this person was taking pictures of all this cruelty that this regime is doing, and came to the United States, and the United States really pushed for Caesar sanctions on the Assad regime, and that was passed in 2019, I believe, by President Donald Trump. And, you know, these sanctions really helped overthrow the regime, and these sanctions have been currently lifted for the new government to, you know, start rebuilding the country. So, yeah, as of December 8th, they have new currency, and they're going to get rid of 2 zeros, apparently. So what used to be 11,000 is going to be now $110. And Russia is currently going to be printing them for them. And this whole strategic thing by cutting 2 zeros, Turkey did this in their economy, and it has helped them. So inshallah, will have the same effect in Syria. And a lot of countries are helping Syria right now. You know, Turkey being a really big player, Saudi Arabia is a key player, and Qatar is a key player. So we're hoping once these sanctions are lifted, these countries will come in and do their own investments in other Western countries as well to help rebuild the country. So right now we're going to be talking about the historic Oval Office visit, right? He met with U.S. President Donald Trump. And this is historic. Absolutely historic, you know. The last time a Syrian president has been in that very Oval Office was when Palestine was still Palestine. So what was discussed in this visit? Israel was obviously discussed, the SDF was discussed, and ISIS was discussed. Those are the 3 main things. So shortly after the visit, Syria joined the coalition to fight ISIS. And that is amazing because, you know, he really knows what these groups think, you know, how to target them the right way and everything. For those who don't know, he was in Al-Qaeda, and that's why most Americans don't want him, you know. We obviously know that Al-Qaeda did the attack on the Twin Towers, 9/11, right? And as Muslims, we obviously condemn those attacks, you know. We don't associate ourselves with ISIS or Al-Qaeda or whatsoever, you know. This is not what the religion teaches. You know, it clearly says in the Quran, if you take one life, it's like you took all of humanity. If you save one life, it's like you saved all of humanity. We don't kill innocent people, right? And he was in Al-Qaeda in 2003. But we have to look at why he joined Al-Qaeda. What happened in 2003? The Iraq war, that illegal war that the U.S. conducted on Iraq. You know, when a country is coming to kill you, go to war with you for absolutely no reason under the false premises of weapons of mass destruction. We all know that was a key lie. That was a lie to invade the country. And as Iraqis, as neighboring countries, what view do you have of the U.S.? You have the view of, the U.S. is coming to illegally occupy our land. When you illegally conduct a war, when you illegally come to occupy a land, you're gonna naturally be met with resistance, and that's why he ultimately joined Al Qaeda, and he left shortly after that. And when he was in charge of Idlib, people don't know that either. He was in charge of Idlib for years. He controlled Idlib for years. So when he was in charge, he fought off Al Qaeda and ISIS out of the country. And when he came to the U.S., I went down to D.C. I saw him in person. I didn't meet with him, I didn't talk to him, but I was part of the crowd outside the White House. And it was a beautiful thing, We saw Sunnis, we saw Shias, we saw Druze, we saw Christians, We were all there in D.C. showing solidarity to the new government, all these different sects in Syria, we want to rebuild the country. That's our main goal right now. It was a beautiful thing of solidarity and unity and everything. And a lot of people say, he's a Mossad puppet and all this stuff, right? If he was a Mossad puppet, why is Netanyahu openly stating that he is pissed off? Your logic makes no sense, right? Netanyahu is openly saying, hey, Donald Trump, don't lift sanctions on Syria. Let's carve Syria into four, and put a minority president in power like Assad was, We can't let these people take power, right? He's openly scared. He's occupying more land. He's bombing Syria. He's bombed Syria over 400 times in the last year alone, He's openly saying, I'm not happy, but you guys are saying that he is? It makes no sense, Ultimately, Netanyahu knows this is not a good thing for him. But why hasn't Trump been listening to Netanyahu? They've been clashing. That's not a secret. And Erdogan's voice is louder in Trump's ear on Syria than Netanyahu is. Trump is saying, I'm a NATO ally. Let me look after security in Syria. Donald Trump wants to withdraw from Syria like he withdrew from Afghanistan. He doesn't want any more tax-paying dollars to be spent on Syria. He's like, let's keep the security with Erdogan. He's a NATO ally. I trust him, and I like him. Trump openly says he likes Erdogan. So we continue to pray that Erdogan's ear is louder in Trump's ear on Syria versus Netanyahu. And Netanyahu was coming on the 29th of this month, December 29th. And one of the key things on his agenda was why are you about to lift sanctions on Syria? We can't let this happen. But Netanyahu, guess what? It's too late. The country's going to thrive. So the reason why people support Ashada so much is he represents freedom. He represents hope of rebuilding the country after the 50-plus years of tyranny, of oppression that the Syrians have had, There's a lot of Syrians who were forced to do stuff against their will, who were forced to do atrocities against their will out of fear of them being dead or their family, There's this guy who's been exiled since 1970, I believe. And his family was dead because of him. When he left the country, Hafez al-Assad went after his family and killed him, This is the type of tyranny Syrians have experienced. We can't forget that. We can't forget the stuff that we saw out of Sednaya prison. We saw the human press. We saw that acid. We saw the guillotine. There was even these spikes where the personnel will put your butt on the spike and it will slowly go up your body and kill you. It could be a straight shot to your head or this out of your shoulder. And that'll be a slow death, These are the type of things that this regime has done. We can't forget that. So, and a lot of people say, Hafez al-Assad and... So a lot of people say Hafez al-Assad and, Bashar al-Assad was amazing, They were pro-Palestine. If they were so pro-Palestine... Why? Look at the Marmuk camp in Damascus, right? What happened? Seized, water cut off, food cut off, bombed to oblivion, And guess who lived there? Palestinian refugees. You know, it's really showing that you guys are trying to paint a agenda against the new government just because you're so butthurt that this tyrant regime has fallen, you know. And we all know who are behind these comments. We all know it's the Alawites, the Shias, even the Israelis cause division, you know. But we all know the truth. We know the truth that the Assad family was a proxy of Israel. They listened to Israel. They did whatever Israel told them to do so that they can always distract the Syrians. And the Palestinians and the Syrians, they have shared history, right? Before the Europeans carved up the land, you know, it was Bilad al-Sham. We prayed in each other's cities, right? We traded in each other's markets. We married into each other's families. The ties between Nablus and Damascus were so deep that the Palestinians will call Nablus Little Damascus. And when the colonial borders split the region, the Syrians and Palestinians, they didn't rise up alone. They rised up together. They defended their homelands. During the Syrian revolt against the French, Palestinians would smuggle weapons, money, and supplies to the rebels. And many Palestinians joined the Syrians into this fight, you know? The Palestinians helped Syria gain their independence from the French. And a decade later, the opposite happened, right? Syrians joined to revolt with the Palestinians against the Brits and the Zionists. So they do have love for each other, you know? The ties run deep. Whatever the future may bring, we're always stronger together. And none of us are free until we are all free. We have to remember that, right? And like I said, a lot of people praise these groups like Hezbollah because, oh, they're fighting Israel. They're stopping Israel from occupying Lebanon, right? So are you going to praise them? Are you going to forget that Hezbollah killed millions and millions of Muslims in the Middle East? Are you going to forget that? Oh, no, let's put that aside and praise these groups. You know, these groups are terrorists. They committed atrocities. They've killed over 1 million people in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, right? They wanted Assad's goal, Iran's goal, and these proxies' goals was to make Syria all Shia and Alawite, right? They wanted a bridge from Damascus to freaking Yemen, right? This was their main goal, to commit these atrocities so we can Shia, for the region to become more Shia. It's that whole Sunni versus Shia divide. We can't let this divide keep hurting us. We need to unite. So now let's talk about my predictions for 2026. You know, that's right around the corner. What I think will happen is something's going to happen with the SDF. We'll see what it is. You know, only time will tell. And I believe that the economy will recover significantly. Obviously, it's going to take a lot of time, but like there's going to be a big difference in the year of 26 compared to what it is now, you know. Now that these Caesar sanctions are lifted, these were like the most cruel sanctions imaginable, right? So now that these are lifted, it's going to help the Syrians tremendously, right? And Syrians are smart people. You know, eventually in the future, inshallah, Syria is going to be a strong country. Syrians are smart people, you know. They breed the engineers, doctors, businessmen, and everything, right? Even Trump said it himself. You know, we're going to be able to rebuild our country. We're strong people like that. We're going to, you know, there's no question about it. We're going to rebuild the military. We're going to rebuild our economy. We're going to rebuild the billions and hundreds of billions of dollars of destruction that the regime caused. You know, we're going to be able to do it. And I believe that it's going to be a unified Syria in 2026. Right now, the SDF is a big thing. You know, once whatever happens to them and the new government controls that, it's going to be a big thing. Countries start investing in Syria. We're going to see the Gulf countries as well. And we thank the Gulf countries, you know. We thank Turkey, we thank Saudi, we thank all the countries who have been involved in helping Syria to this point, you know. Erdogan's been a big factor. Saudi's been a big factor. Mohammed bin Salman, he's been a big factor. He was in Trump's ear saying, we really need to lift sanctions off Syria. And that's when Trump announced it on May 13th in Saudi, we're going to be able to do this. And Erdogan as well did the same thing. The UAE has already invested in Syria. We thank them for that. So the year 2026 is going to be a big year. And the years coming after that is going to be a big year, In 4 years, there's going to be the first election in the country. A year has already passed, so there's 4 years left, If everything goes well, we're going to have the first elections, right? This is something that Syrians are not used to. We've never had elections before. So this is what we want, a true democracy, right? We want our rights upheld in a democracy to choose who we want in power. So in 4 years, there's going to be elections. There's already been elections for the parliament, and they did the best they could, quite frankly. And all sects are involved in rebuilding the country. In the parliament currently, in the new transitional government, there's all sects. There's Alawites, there's Shias, there's Sunnis, there's Christians, there's everything, right? So it's going to be a unified country once again, and we're all going to help each other rebuild the country. And one thing I did forget to mention is the Christians in Syria. Christians are the backbone of the country, right? Christians, there's a town in Damascus that still speaks the original language of Isa alayhi salam, right? Of Jesus, peace be upon him. They still speak Aramaic to this day, And there was a suicide bombing in a church that really made the Christians feel like it's not really safe for us. But, that suicide bomber was an Assad loyalist to cause this division. A lot of Christians right now, quite frankly, they do like Ahmed al-Sharaa. They know that he does not cause a threat to them. And I remember when Assad was toppled, people are saying, oh, there's Christians being beheaded in Syria, we didn't have this under Assad. This is ridiculous. But those videos that were being leaked was during the Assad regime. It wasn't even the new government. When Assad was toppled, the new government went to Christians, right? They said, we're not a threat to you guys, right? Assad is now gone. You guys can practice freely. You can do whatever you want. We're not going to be here to cause a threat to you guys. We're going to come back tomorrow. We're going to take pictures. This is a Christian valley. It's called the Christian Valley in the countryside of Homs, right? So the new government does not pose a threat at all. Christians celebrate. The Muslims were celebrating. Shias, Alawites, everybody was celebrating the fall of Assad. And it wasn't all the Alawites and Shias, obviously, because some of them are still butthurt. But, some were. And that's a big thing, right? This is what we need. We need unity to rebuild the country. So let me know in the comment section what you guys think will be the future of Syria, what you guys think of the new government, and, just let me know in the comment section what you think, and we'll see you next episode.
الله الرحمن الرحيم. أيها الإخوة، أيها المؤمنون، أيها الشعب العظيم